There is a detail about Jim Cornette that most people never hear about. During the height of his rivalry with the Rock and Roll Express, Cornette began loading his tennis racket with a horseshoe, not to use on Ricky Morton or Robert Gibson, but to defend himself from the fans on the way out of the building. I said these horrible, degrading things about these two fine, young, upstanding examples of American boyhood, and people, on numerous occasions, tried to kill us. So what exactly did the Rock and Roll Express do to people that made even their enemies fear for their lives? In March of 1983, Jerry the King Lawler needed a backup tag team for his Memphis territory. The Fabulous Ones, his top babyface duo, could not wrestle in certain towns, and Lawler needed someone to fill those dates. He paired two young, good-looking, high-energy wrestlers together and pointed them toward the crowd. Their names were Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson. Nobody called them a main event act. Not yet. Within a year, they had moved to Mid-South Wrestling, where they crossed paths with Bobby Eaton, Dennis Condrey, and their manager Jim Cornette. The feud began at a celebration Cornette had thrown for his team. The Rock and Roll Express walked in and shoved Cornette's face straight into the cake. What followed was not just a rivalry, it was the foundation of an entire era. Cornette, reflecting on what made the dynamic work, put it plainly: Superman needs Lex Luthor, Batman needs the Joker, and we were the antithesis of everything the Rock and Roll Express stood for and their wrestling style. It just clicked. What clicked specifically was a match structure that the Rock and Roll Express had refined into something close to a science. Ricky Morton would absorb punishment, absorb it convincingly, dangerously, until the crowd was on the edge of breaking. And then Gibson would get the tag. Two men, one formula, endlessly effective. The wrestling world would spend the next 4 decades trying to copy it. There is a phrase still used in professional wrestling today. When a wrestler takes a sustained beating from the opposing team, absorbing punishment, selling desperation, keeping the crowd invested through sheer performance, it is called playing Ricky Morton. Not a move, not a finishing hold, a role. Named after one man because no one else has ever done it better. Every night, Morton would step into the role of a man being systematically taken apart, and every night, the crowd would believe every second of it. One wrestling observer described the result plainly: Ricky Morton playing babyface in peril like few have ever been able to do, leading to what was almost always the hottest of hot tags. What separated Morton from everyone who tried to imitate him was the level of commitment he brought outside the ring, not just inside it. During one extended angle with Ric Flair, Morton actually scratched his own face with sandpaper before traveling between cities, so that the wounds from Flair's attacks would look real to anyone who saw him on the road. He wore a face guard in public. He stayed in character between shows, in hotel lobbies, at airports, in diners. The injury was never just for the arena. It was for anyone watching. Inside the ring, the commitment ran even deeper. Arn Anderson, one of the most technically precise wrestlers of that era, has recalled that during matches against Morton, he would lean in and quietly ask, "Are you actually hurt?" Morton's selling was so convincing that his opponents genuinely could not tell the difference between performance and real injury. That is not a compliment you can manufacture. That is a skill that takes years to develop and a certain kind of psychological fearlessness to execute. Sportskeeda captured it simply. Morton became known for being able to convince Rock and Roll Express loyal fans that he was on the verge of death in the ring. And this is where the dynamic became genuinely unsettling for opponents. When you work with Ricky Morton, you are responsible for calibrating your offense against a man who will make everything look real, which means the crowd will react as if everything is real. You are no longer just wrestling. You are performing surgery in front of an audience that wants to rush the table. One mistimed spot, one moment where Morton's reaction outpaces the move, and the building becomes a pressure cooker. Opponents had to stay sharp not because Morton would expose them technically, but because Morton would make the crowd feel things that change the atmosphere entirely. That is a different kind of dangerous. In professional wrestling, there is a hierarchy that almost never gets broken. The top single star headlines the biggest show, the tag teams fill the undercard. That is the rule. The Rock and Roll Express did not follow it. At Jim Crockett Promotions in the mid-1980s, the company regularly ran 2 shows on the same night in different cities. The A-Team card carried the biggest names: Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, the Four Horsemen. The Rock and Roll Express were assigned to the B-Team cards. What happened next was not supposed to happen. Night after night, night, Morton and Gibson were outdrawing the A-team. Not occasionally, not once or twice as a fluke. Consistently, in arenas across the South, the B show with the Rock and Roll Express was bringing in more people than the show headlined by the company's top stars. It reached a breaking point in Charlotte. The Rock and Roll Express sold out the Charlotte Coliseum on a night when Dusty Rhodes, who was also the booker, was not on the card. Rhodes called Morton and Gibson into his office afterward. Robert Gibson recalled what he said. "Y'all do not, and I mean y'all do not, sell out the Charlotte Coliseum when I am not on the card." That was not a warning about professionalism. That was a booker telling two wrestlers they had become too popular for his comfort. Rhodes responded by booking them into singles matches, a deliberate move to separate the team and reduce their combined drawing power. Steve Austin, commenting on the situation, was direct. He should have put himself on the card. He should have been happy you two were selling out. What makes this story remarkable is not the politics. It is what the politics reveal. When a booker feels threatened enough by a tag team to actively work against them, that tag team has achieved something genuinely rare. The Rock and Roll Express were not just popular, they were powerful enough to make the people above them nervous. Ole Anderson was not an easy man to impress. He had spent decades in the business as both a wrestler and a booker, and he had very specific ideas about what a credible professional wrestler looked like. Size mattered to Ole. Physicality mattered. When the Rock and Roll Express came up on the booking sheet as potential opponents, his reaction was immediate and dismissive. Too small, not credible, not the kind of team he wanted to be seen working against. Then the shows happened. Arena after arena across the South sold out when the Rock and Roll Express were on the card opposite Ole and his partners. The gates were undeniable. The crowd reactions were unlike anything Ole had seen produced by two men of that size. His position changed, not because anyone convinced him with an argument, but because the numbers made the argument for them. The most significant moment came at Starrcade in November of 1986. The Rock and Roll Express defended the NWA World Tag Team Championship against Ole and Arn Anderson inside a steel cage. Morton and Gibson won. Ole was pinned. The aftermath inside the locker room was severe. The loss positioned Ole as the weakest link within the Four Horsemen, and he was removed from the group shortly after. For a faction built entirely around dominance and prestige, losing to the Rock and Roll Express carried real consequences. As wrestling historians have noted, the first real setback with the Horsemen occurred at Starrcade 86 after Anderson and Ole lost a steel cage match to the Rock and Roll Express, with Ole getting pinned. A team created as a backup option had just cracked the most powerful faction in the history of the NWA. Ole Anderson started out refusing to work with them. He ended up losing his spot in the Four Horsemen because of them. To understand how over the Rock and Roll Express truly were, you have to look beyond the arenas. The reaction they generated did not stay inside the building when the show ended. It followed them everywhere. Robert Gibson has confirmed that during their peak run in Jim Crockett Promotions, he and Morton went 9 months without a single day off. When they asked for time away, Jim Crockett's answer was straightforward. Giving them a day off would cost too much money in lost ticket sales. The only way they ever got rest was by faking injuries. Two professional wrestlers at the absolute top of their industry had to pretend to be hurt just to sleep. Outside the arena, the situation was no less intense. Morton and Gibson were asked to leave Carowinds Amusement Park in Charlotte because their presence had drawn such a large crowd that security could no longer manage the flow of people. The park was functionally shutting down around them. On a separate occasion, the Charlotte Police Department began stationing an officer outside their homes on a regular basis to keep fans from gathering on their property at all hours. Jim Cornette, who spent years trying to destroy their careers, described what he witnessed when he visited fans' homes during the Smoky Mountain Wrestling years. Fans literally gave them pictures and gifts at the matches. They considered them members of the family. I've seen inside fans' houses, and they would have pictures of Jesus on the wall, and next to it would be a picture of the Rock and Roll Express. That's no lie. During one promotional contest, a number of female fans won dream dates with Morton and Gibson. The fans arrived with their parents. A photographer from a major wrestling publication was present. Everything was proper and documented. And yet, in the weeks that followed, one woman wrote in to say that she wished she could give both men a particular illness, just so she could be the one to treat them. It was meant as a joke, but it also was not entirely a joke. That is the level of devotion the Rock and Roll Express inspired in the people who watched them. Jim Cornette has managed world champions. He has been involved in some of the most significant matches and storylines in the history of professional wrestling. And when asked to identify the greatest tag team rivalry of all time, he does not hesitate. The Midnight Express and the Rock and Roll Express were the greatest tag team rivalry of all time and drew more money than any other tag team rivalry probably in history. That is not a statement made out of nostalgia. It is a statement made by the man who was inside the rivalry, managing against Morton and Gibson from the first year it began. He watched the gates. He counted the houses. He saw what happened in the buildings when these two teams were on the same card. What made the feud work was not just talent on both sides, though the talent was real. It was architecture. Cornette gave the crowd a reason to despise the Midnight Express. His voice, his insults, his interference. And Morton and Gibson gave the crowd a reason to care desperately about the outcome. The formula fed itself. Every time the Midnight Express cheated to win, the crowd's investment in seeing the Rock and Roll Express get revenge grew larger. Every rematch drew more heat than the last. Cornette reflected on what the two teams built together. We invented things as we went along that people had never seen. It was always different. And it was always good. One particular evening in February of 1986 illustrated just how far that investment had gone. The two teams were scheduled to wrestle to a 60-minute time limit draw. The timekeeper that night was a fan, and a devoted one. When the 60 minutes expired, he refused to ring the bell. He simply would not call the match. He wanted the Rock and Roll Express to win, and as long as he controlled the clock, the match kept going. The wrestlers eventually figured out what was happening and improvised their own ending. A man responsible for one of the most neutral jobs in the building had been so consumed by his belief in Morton and Gibson that he abandoned his post rather than let the match end without a winner. That level of crowd investment cannot be manufactured. It cannot be booked into existence. It has to be earned, match by match, town by town, over years of consistent work. The feud between the two teams did not end in 1986. It did not end in the 90s. Independent promoters continued booking them against each other for 3 decades because the reaction never fully disappeared. The final match of the rivalry came in 2015 when Bobby Eaton, in one of the last matches of his career, stepped into the ring against Ricky Morton one final time. Morton won. The feud ended the same way it had always gone, with the Rock and Roll Express standing at the end. The influence of the Rock and Roll Express did not stay in the 1980s. It moved forward, quietly, through every generation that followed. When Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty formed the Rockers, the blueprint they were working from had Ricky Morton's fingerprints all over it. Two young, athletic, charismatic babyfaces built around speed and crowd sympathy. The model was not original, it was inherited. Without Morton and Gibson defining what that archetype could achieve at the highest level, there is no version of the Rockers that gets over the way it did. And without the Rockers, the career of Shawn Michaels looks very different. In March of 1983, nobody would have predicted that two wrestlers from Memphis would still be shaping how tag team wrestling was performed 30 and 40 years into the future. Decades later, the Young Bucks pointed back to the same source. In October of 2019, Morton and Gibson won the NWA World Tag Team Championship for the 9th time. Both men were in their 60s. The reaction from the crowd was not polite appreciation for veterans. It was genuine, because when that music hit, it still meant something. Jim Cornette, the man who spent the better part of 4 decades trying to stop them, delivered the final word at their WWE Hall of Fame induction in 2017. By any standard, Ricky and Robert belong in the Hall of Fame, whether it's longevity as a team, the attendance records they set, or the great matches that they had. People kept asking why two men in their 60s were still out there. The answer was simple: nobody told them the game was over. And the crowd never stopped believing it wasn't.